So you were saying you almost have it. You just need to spend more time with it. And that's the thing. Everything, and we learn through repetition and everything that we learn. So the more we repeat, and what I'm doing is I'm taking you, just keep taking you forward, and we haven't been doing any repetition. But
Yeah.
we definitely will do that. Like I said, when we've got all the puzzle pieces together, then we'll start actually playing with the puzzle pieces more, and then it will start making a lot more sense. So what we have as the final most important piece of the puzzle, there's actually another one, which is the aspects, and that's shown by these lines in here, which are the mathematical relationships between planets, and we'll bring that in after we've played with with the signs, houses, and planets a certain amount.
Okay.
So what we're now looking at are the houses, because now we're able to look at an astrological chart. Now, just so you know, this astrological chart is this morning. It's not somebody's chart, although I'm sure it is somebody's chart, but if somebody was born this morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I figured that way it's nice and neutral. And you're going to see the planets in it because that's what an astrological chart looks like. But I used this system because there are a couple of ways to draw a chart, and one actually puts lines in to like pie pieces to describe the houses. So this has the first house is right here. And that's why it's number 1. Second house is that pie piece there. Third house is that pie piece there. Now on the outside, we've got the signs. So we have, this is the ascendant, which is the beginning of the first house. And the ascendant, you can see it goes right over here into the sign of Gemini. And the ascendant here gives you the exact mathematical location of where in Gemini is the rising sign, which we don't need to really look at in any more depth right now. We just know that whoever this person was who was born this morning, they have Gemini rising, and Gemini rules their first house. They have Gemini rising, Gemini is their ascendant. So to say Gemini rising, or Gemini is their rising sign, or Gemini is their ascendant, those are all different ways of saying the same thing. Now, this is actually a symbolic map of the sky at the time the person was born. And this, the ascendant, is exactly where the eastern horizon was. So we could look out there towards the east this morning, and we would see no planets over in the east. But we would, if we had the ability, because it was daytime, there's the sun up, right, almost at the top of the sky, so it was bright daylight, we wouldn't really see any planets. If it was nighttime, we could look over there just above the east, and we'd see a little bright shiny planet. And what planet do you think that is? Do you remember what that planet is?
Oh man.
It's an easy one because it tends to get used for other things in our society.
It's an easy one.
Yeah. Let's just flip it.
I think I'm overthinking it.
Yeah. Let's just go back here. Now, which planet is it?
Mars.
Right. Okay, so there's Mars. So we can see Mars is in house number 12. And all of the houses from 7 till 12 are pieces of the sky that's visible. So at the time this imaginary person was born, these were all the planets that would have been visible in the sky. If we could see them, because it was too bright and sunny, we wouldn't see any of the other planets. When it was nighttime, we'd be seeing all these planets that were visible. And up here is what we have as, here's the midheaven. Now there's another way to draw the chart, but unfortunately this system doesn't draw it this way. And it draws the houses always of equal pie pieces. And I like looking at it that way because this is the beginning of the 10th house, which is the midheaven, which is actually what's directly overhead when we look up. So this doesn't draw it very accurately that way. Is
it the easiest way to look at it though?
I think it's the easiest way to look at it is with the midheaven is always drawn straight up and down. And the houses are the same size, and then it will make the signs. You see here, the signs are all the same size.
Yeah.
But if we make the houses all the same size, the signs, some of them are going to be fat and some of them are going to be skinny, which is just how We're really looking at two different wheels, and you can see it here. We have on the outside, we have the wheel of the zodiac, and on the inside, the wheel of the houses. And the two different wheels are superimposed on top of each other.
Okay.
So, and the houses, the same way the signs are related to times of year, the houses are related to times of day and to the impact that times of day have on us on a subliminal level. So all of these 6 houses are parts of the sky we couldn't see because they're underneath the earth. So the 7th house is the sunset position, and it's where planets are getting ready to set. So if we could see the planets, we would see over in the west a big bright Jupiter. That's the Jupiter symbol, and Jupiter would be getting ready to set. About another hour later, Jupiter would have gone down into the 6th house. So the planets are all kind of moving clockwise through the chart as the houses actually move counterclockwise because of how the Earth is orbiting. But the important thing is, what do these houses mean? What do they relate to? So this first house has to do with our personality, our self, our identity. So first thing that we discover when we're born is, oh, this is me. That's the first thing. And the second house is, after me, the baby learns mine. So the second house has to do with things I own. This has to do with my money, my people I love. This is my, when you grow up, this is my mate, this is my partner. This is my source of emotional security. These are my talents and abilities. These are my values. These are the things that I stand for as a person. So that's what the second house rules. Primarily, it's traditionally considered to be the house of money. So you can think of this as me, my money, and my buddies. It's the third house. The third house, friends, but it's also me and my environment. So the third house is about, okay, I know who I am. I've got my blankie, and now I can go wander around and explore. And okay, there's my sister. Do I like my sister? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I like my sister. So the third house has to do with siblings. It has to do with our friends and neighbors, the people next door. And it has to do with journeying around and learning about life, studying things. We're going to pick something up and put it in our mouths and figure out whether it tastes funny or not. We like the taste. That's third house. That's the third house. So one thing to understand right away about the houses is that they obviously, all experiences of life can be found in one or more houses. So this means that each house really rules more than one thing, but those things that it rules are all connected. So traveling around and exploring the world, our neighbors, our friends, our siblings, our thoughts, and the things we discover and learn about, they all have a similar frequency, even though they're actually different aspects of life. So myself, my stuff, my environment, my friends. And then after you've wandered around and visited with your friends and you want to come back in and go home for the night. Now this is the 4th house, which is my home, my security, my family. This also corresponds to the midnight point. Any planets that are in the 4th house, especially if they're right at the beginning of the 4th house, they actually were exactly on the other side of the planet at the moment you were born. They were completely hidden from sight. But the planet itself is our home. That is our most primal home. So it's emotional security.
Foundation, emotional security, yeah.
Yeah. Now, 4th house is also any foundation that we build upon. So the foundations of our home that we live in, but it also relates to the foundations of our career, for our long-term stability. And there are different teachings about the parents, because for most systems of astrology look at the 4th house and the 10th house opposite to it as our two parents. But as to which parent is ruled by which house it's not been widely agreed upon. The most traditional, in my understanding, is the 4th house rules your opposite sexed parent. And when I look at charts, that's the thing. as when I see how they interpret, how they work out, it's the thing that makes the most sense to me. So then when we get to the 5th house, we're still talking about me, because everything that's all the houses underneath the horizon, they're all very personal, subjective houses. This is me and my stuff, me and my experiences. So after I've got my stuff, my friends, my environment, my home, then I've got a foundation from which to express myself. So the 5th house is creative expression. We also are getting out of the more childlike part of the chart. So we're starting to head into our teens symbolically. And this is my love affairs, my romance. It's also children. So we're really becoming a lot more adult, my children. Our self-expression, our creativity, really for many people, it does feel like our children. Somebody writes a book and they send it off into the world, or they paint a painting and they sell it. It's like saying goodbye to one of your children for a lot of people. So myself, my stuff, my friends, my home, my self-expression. It's number 5. Number 6 is, how did this all turn out? What are the results of all of this? 6th is my health. Did I, if this wasn't a healthy experience, it's going to show up in our physical body by the time we get to house 6. Also, by house 6, we're getting ready to go into house 7, which the 7th house is now about relationships. So the 6th house is about preparing for relationships. And it's also about realizing that you're not the only person in the world. So the 6th house rules service. It rules our servants. So if you are more self-oriented, the 6th house is going to be about your servants. Or if you're in a situation where, that you're more inclined to have servants. But it can also be about your service. What is it you serve in life? Who do you give to and serve? Who are you healing? Who are you helping? And the 6th house also rules pets. So sometimes people with strong 6th houses love animals, have a lot of pets. I have about 5 planets in my 6th house, and I had many, many, many pets at one point in my life. Lots of animals. Okay, so then we get to house 7. It's the opposite to the 1st house. And so the opposite houses always relate to each other. So this is me, this is my partner. This is me, this is the public. So the 7th house has to do with how I'm seen in public, how I see the outside world, my marriage partner, my intimate relationships. But it also traditionally in astrology rules my enemies. And if you get into the deeper spiritual symbolism or more mystical symbolism in the 7th house, it's my shadow, which is the part of me that I say, this is not me. Because this is the first time we've gotten to a house that's not about me. So what I'm experiencing out there is the part of me that I don't own, my shadow. So then we go and marry it so we can get it back. And this person has Jupiter there, so this is going to help that area of their lives. The baby that was born this morning.
Jupiter is lucky, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So 8th house is the continuation of the 2nd house, or the opposite, the complement to the 2nd house. So this is me and my stuff. This is my partner and their stuff. So this has to do with your partner's finances, but it also has to do with the collective resources of a marriage, the collective resources of a business partnership, and the collective resources we share with the general public. And also the power and resources of our enemies. So the 8th house is an intense house. As well, in the 2nd house, the very first mine we ever have in our lives is our mom. This is my mom. So the 2nd house is a house of affection and not just of money. So the 8th house is the house of the emotional and physical and sexual expression of a partnership. So the 8th house of sexuality. And in the 7th house, we're really aware that this is me, this is my partner. But in the 8th house is really the first place where I say self meets not self. So the 8th house is also traditionally considered to be the house of death. Now, what's interesting is transits to the 8th house do not say you're going to die. It has more to do with learning about death or my attitudes toward death. So 8th house is not going to tell you about your actual death, but it is going to tell you about your perspective, your understanding, your attitude to that part of life. And the 8th house is, it's the house of where here we can have a 7th house, it's a shadow, and we say, well, that's not me, and we project it out to someone else. And the 8th house, if anything triggers the 8th house, our shadow comes back and says, hello, I belong to you. So we really face ourselves and deeply transform ourselves in the 8th house. The 8th house rules ecology, because it is the most profound collective resource that we have in this world. As well, it's our sense of true responsibility is connected to the 8th house, because again, the 8th house is where self meets not self. So it's basically a house where the rubber meets the road. And again, this poor little kid has got some intense planets there. So
if you were having health problems in the 6th house, like, I know you're not meaning death in the literal way, but like you typically, like, if you're having health problems, I guess there's no prediction in a certain house of when that would happen, I guess.
Well, actually, if there are important planets transiting the 6th house or the 12th house, it increases the likelihood that people will have health problems then, but it also vastly increases the likelihood that there'll be solvable health problems. Because those are the times when these things come up to the surface to be looked at and fixed.
Okay.
But by the time we get to the 8th house, it's more likely, if they haven't been, if we're going through a transit that takes us through the 6th, the 7th, and 8th, and we haven't solved health problems that showed up in the 6th, they're not likely to kill a person in the 8th house, but they might be more inclined to become more chronic at that point.
Okay.
Just as, and then every situation is so individual. That's the other thing that's always important to remember.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about the 9th house, and then I think we'll do the other 3 houses later on. So 9th house is, again, opposite to the 3rd house. So if the 3rd house is I'm exploring and I'm experiencing my environment and my relationships on a personal level that are friends and relatives. 9th house is my true relationship to all that is. Traditionally, in traditional astrology, the 9th house is the house of God. It's our spiritual philosophy. The 9th house is higher education. So 3rd house this is grade school. That's where we're learning ABCs and our basic maths. 9th house, we're learning the deep philosophical understanding of things. We're learning our quantum physics that take us straight to God. It's a house of, 3rd house is short little trips and traveling around and exploring an immediate environment. 9th house is large trips and traveling overseas, experiencing completely different cultures. So.
Can I ask you a question? So, like, and I think we've talked offline about this before, but relationships, like, there's obviously like certain houses where, like, it's just an example of, like, life stages that would be more prominent in a house, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen in that house, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Or it just means that it's more likely in that house.
Correct. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. It means that issue tends to be up. And if there's any reason for things to change there, they can, they're inclined to, but it certainly means that there's evolution going on as far as that aspect, that area of life for the person, whether it's inner or outer. It depends on the situation.
Okay.
Okay, so when last time we were talking about the houses, and we actually were at that point in time, we were looking at a chart that was the chart of that day. And now we're on a different day to start talking about the last 3 houses. And I just pulled up another chart instead of the chart of the day, which is a chart we're going to be working with later on. But here we have the 12 houses again. And we finished up to house 9 before. So we have house 10, 11, and 12, and then we have them all. So once we get to house 10, the sun is, when the sun is in the 10th house, or when the sun enters the 10th house, the sun is directly overhead. So at noon, the sun is directly overhead. So it has to do with what is above us, what is visible at the height of the day, at the height of noon, And so the 10th house primarily has to do with how we appear to the outside world, how we appear to society, and it has to do with our career. Because what are most people doing in the middle of the day? They're going to be really fully, completely, and utterly engaged in their work. Probably they had their lunch while sun was in the 9th house. And then when sun is in the 10th house, they're back to work, and you're going to do your most productive work after you've had your lunch. So the 10th house is our career, our role in society. The 10th house is also connected to the midheaven, which is the name for the beginning of the 10th house cusp. And the sign that is on the 10th house cusp is a person's midheaven. And the person's midheaven is not as important or as strong as the ascendant, but is a part of us. And it's a part of us that we tend to show to the world when we're working in our career, but also when we feel nervous, because it's a less intimate part of our being. It's the part of us that we put on for show, although it's a real part of us. It's a part of us that we're comfortable expressing to people, whether or not we feel safe at the moment because we're shy, it's a new situation, it's a public arena, and it's a form of behavior that makes us feel safe and that we feel will also make other people feel safe. So that's midheaven, which is very connected to the 10th house, of course, which is our public role and our role in society. And it's how we relate to the conventional demands of society as well. Whereas the 11th house is how the 10th house is the house of the world as it is, and the conventional arenas of society, business that already exists that we're going into and working on. But the 11th house is the house of the future. It's the house of the way we want things to be, the way things should be. It's a very humanitarian house, whereas the 10th house is that business arena. We might have to sacrifice some of our humanitarian ideals when we're in the 10th house. The 11th house will have no part of that. The 11th house is our hopes, our dreams, our wishes, what we long for in our lives, the things that will make us happy, the contribution we want to make to society, how we think the world should be in the future, that even the new steps, the new evolutionary steps that are going on in society. So this is the time of day when it's earlier in our workday, because we actually as we go through the 12 houses, where they all relate to times of day, but they are actually earlier times of day each house. So the 11th house is mid-morning. So at mid-morning, we're more, when like earlier you were all excited about getting everything all organized and it was great, and then you hit the 10th house problems. Or like, this computer won't let me do this or that, and I'm having trouble structuring this. But in the 11th house, we're idealistic because we're just starting to get going with things, and it's early enough in the day that we're still in contact with who we were when we were asleep, which was our real self. So the 11th house also rules our friends. And now there's two friendship houses, the 11th house and the 3rd house, but they're two different kinds of friends. 11th house kinds of friends are friends that we make because we share common goals and ideals. So these are the friends that inspire us towards the future, inspire us towards our dreams, or that we feel are going to help us get to where we want to be. Whereas 3rd house friends are the kid we grew up with next door. And this is our hangout buddy that's always been there. We can let our hair down. Sometimes the 11th house kinds of friends, we want to impress them because we're inspired. So we want to put our best image out. And my sense about friendship is the ideal friend, of course, is both kinds. Somebody you can completely relax and be yourself with, who also inspires you about the future.
So what are you trying to achieve in house 10? Like, if it's like, are you like,
it's your accomplishments. It's your worldly accomplishments.
Okay.
It's your adjustment to the conventional world, the world as it is today and now. Now, depending on what kinds of planets people have in this house, some people have planets that want to shake this conventional arena up. Mm-hmm. People don't have a lot of planets in the 10th house, so they're not too interested in this conventional arena. And some people can really excel in a conventional arena. And so it's where they make tremendous accomplishments, because what they're here to do and what their purpose is about is welcomed by the existing structures in society.
Okay.
But people tend to be either more a 10th house or a more 11th house kinds of people. Some people can be comfortable in both, but I think most people, they're going to have a house they prefer.
Okay.
So yeah, 11th house is the house of what do I want to be when I grow up also. So that actually could go on the list. What do I want to be when I grow up? No, whatever age you are, that's what that house is about. Doesn't matter. If you're 90, you still have what you want to be when you grow up in your 11th house. So 12th house. Now 12th house is the time of day when the sun's just risen and we're just waking up. Our dreams are still in our memory. So we're in contact with our soul a lot more at the 12th house time of day and with our subconscious. So the 12th house is the house where all our subconscious memories are stored. It's the house of all our past life memories. It's the house of our very emotionally based spiritual longings, very personal spiritual longings. Whereas ninth house is about our philosophy. Ninth house is the religion I might belong to and the ideas that religion has. The 12th house are my own personal feelings about my religious or spiritual experience, my private feelings about that part of life. So the 12th house rules any kinds of retreats or going off to meditate for a long time, just going off to be by yourself, or going off on an artistic retreat. It also rules hospitalizations and seclusions. It's traditionally said to be the hidden enemies, house of hidden enemies. But the hidden enemies are really just the things we've got in our subconscious that we're not conscious of. So if we work to become conscious of things, we aren't going to have any hidden enemies because we're already working on those things that are stored away. So it's a tremendously inspirational house, but for some people it's a bit scary. And again, with past life memories can be positive memories or negative memories. When people have planets in the 12th house, it's an indication of very specific past life memories.
And how long are you spending in each house again?
As far as
like for each house, like we're in there for a few years? Like what does that look like again?
Well, I think what you're asking about is you're asking about transits. And with the transits of Jupiter and Saturn, those two planets are always in a particular house. Everybody's going to have Jupiter in a certain house at this point in time, and everybody's going to have Saturn in a certain house at this point in time. And those are the two, I always call them the hour hand and the minute hand on the clock. So they're the two transits that are always operative. The most important one is Saturn, and it tends to spend an average of 2.5 years in a house. So when you say how long are we in a house, I think that's what you're referring to is the Saturn transit.
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to figure out, like, I know I'm in my 5th house, so how do I know how old I would be when I hit my 12th house? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you?
Yes, you would look in an ephemeris for when Saturn entered, or when Saturn was in the sign that's on your 12th house cusp. And what sign is that?
Oh, that one. It looks like a ram. No, it's not a ram. That's not a ram. It is. See, I can tell the 3 before that, but I don't know what that one is.
Right.
It's always the one you ask me. The one before that is Cancer.
Yes. Well, that's good if you can tell the ones before that. That's
I can tell. Yeah, I could see the ram one. That's not a ram. And I know what Gemini looks like.
Yeah, and that's Cancer. And this one has a mane. It's Leo, and it's got
that's supposed to be
pearls under at the edge of the mane.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm starting to look at it and be able to pick out the signs, but like not all of them quite yet. So that's great. Yeah, that was a good test. Yeah, that's good.
So since this is your chart we're looking at here, actually.
Yeah.
So it was Leo. So when Saturn was in Leo, but Saturn would have been at 5 degrees Leo, 49 minutes. Now I don't know if you remember your geometry, that a circle has 360 degrees. So this is the circle of the zodiac that we're looking at.
Right.
There's 12 signs. There are 30 degrees in each sign, because 30 times 12 equals 360. And the degrees are just ways to sort of determine where in a sign something is. Now, this is why the sun sign predictions don't work, because if something's going to be aspecting your sun, that's what can stir up activity in our lives. It's going to be a planet moving through a specific sign And the sign is an entire 30 degrees. So until that planet gets into the pretty much the same degree as your sun is, it's not going to affect you. So somebody could have the sun in Sagittarius and be born in, say, the 15th of December, and you're born the 25th of November.
Yeah.
The planets are not going to aspect both of you at the same time. Saturn would aspect your sun about a year or two before it would aspect the person's sun who's born in the later part of Sagittarius. This is why the sun sign prediction things won't work based on sun sign, because the mathematics isn't not functional. So when Saturn was in the early part of Leo,
Yeah.
it went into your 12th house. So now that is something you should probably be getting is an ephemeris.
Okay.
So
How do you spell that?
it's EPHEMERIS.
Okay.
Now, a good one is the American ephemeris. So you get the American ephemeris for the 21st century by Neil F. Michelson. That's one I use, and it's, yeah, I wish we had the visual right now because I could show you how decrepit mine is. It's got half its cover bent off. It's long gone. I don't know where it went. And my earlier one for the previous century was my third copy, and it's in 2 pieces. So you use it. You definitely will use it. So you just flip through until you find the Leo. So let me just do that for you just for fun when it was at 5 degrees Leo. Okay, so looks like the first time Saturn went into 5 degrees Leo was the end of August of 2005. And I don't think it retrograded out. No, it didn't retrograde out. So that was when it entered, end of August of 2005.